Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking on a monumental text, a work that's really shaped global strategy for, what, 2.5 millennia. It's informed everyone from ancient generals right up to modern CEOs. We're talking about Sun Tzu's The Art of War. And we are diving directly into the text itself using the, let's say, rigorous scholarly framework laid down by the 1910 Lionel Giles translation.
Yeah, and that translation choice is really key for what we're doing today. Giles himself, he felt he had to produce a definitive version because, well, he thought the earlier attempts were, I think his phrase was, excessively bad.
Ouch. Strong words.
Right. He really wanted to create a true, accessible reflection of Sun Tzu's thinking. And it says a lot that Giles, back in 1910, dedicated this work to his own brother, who was a soldier. It just affirms that these strategic lessons, still vitally relevant, even 2,400 years later.
Okay, so let's unpack the man himself first. Yeah. Who exactly was Sun Tzu, the person behind the strategic blueprint?
Well, the sources we have point to him being Sun Wu, originally from the Chai state. His reputation as a master strategist was apparently so good that he got brought to the attention of Ho Lu, who was the king of Wu, a pretty powerful ruler.
Right.
But King Ho Lu, like any smart leader, he wanted proof. He wasn't just interested in theory, armchair philosophy. He needed to know if Sun Tzu could actually, translate those words into action, deeds.
And that leads us straight into that famous test, doesn't it? The sort of original stress test for military command involving, 180 of the king's palace ladies?
Exactly, that's the one. Sun Tzu, he divides the women into 2 companies. And then, in this clear demonstration that rank means nothing without discipline, he puts the king's 2 absolute favorite concubines in charge of each company.
Okay. High stakes already.
Totally. He gives them simple commands. Front, back, left, right. Standard stuff. But the women, well, you can kind of imagine they just burst into giggles, completely ignored the orders.
Understandable, maybe.
Maybe, but Sun Tzu didn't react with just, anger. He reacted logically. He used it as a teaching moment.
About accountability.
Exactly. He basically said, look, if commands aren't understood, that's the general's fault, my fault. But if they are understood and then they're deliberately disobeyed, well, then the fault lies with the officers in charge, the captains.
Which were the king's favorites.
The king's favorites. So Sun Tzu ordered their execution right then and there.
Wow. Okay, so King Ho Lu must have tried to stop that, saving his favor.
Oh, absolutely. He tried to intervene, basically saying, I get it, you've proved your point, but he admitted he was only fond of words and cannot translate them into deeds. He liked the idea of discipline, not the reality of it in this case.
But Sun Tzu didn't back down.
Nope. He held firm. He made it crystal clear how serious he was about command. He argued that once a general is in the field, he's sometimes free from the sovereign's immediate orders. Courtly concerns don't apply. He proved discipline was absolute, even if it cost the king's pleasure. Brutal clarity, really, and that secured his generalship.
And history shows it worked out for him.
Massively. He went on to achieve huge success, defeated the powerful Chu state, even forced entry into their capital Ying, spread fear among all the neighboring rivals. He wasn't just talk.
It's worth mentioning, though, as you noted, his actual existence, Sun Wu's historicity, was debated later on, mainly because a major historical text, the Ts'ao Shiwan, doesn't mention him.
That's true. That silence is significant. But crucially, the most important ancient historian for this period, Ssu-ma, he clearly accepted Sun Wu as a real figure. And later commentators, like the famous Ts'ao, they explicitly confirmed that these 13 chapters we're diving into. They were written specifically for King Ho Lu.
So it's not just abstract philosophy, then, it's practical.
Exactly. It's a highly practical, very concrete guide for victory, tailored for specific command issues facing that king at that time.
Okay, so let's set out our mission for today. We're going for a rapid-fire, chapter-by-chapter deep dive, pulling up the core strategic wisdom, the foundational ideas, the tactical nuggets from this classic text. And we're starting, interestingly, not with Giles chapter 1, which is more of a prologue, but with chapter 2, laying plans. This is where Sun Tzu really lays down the fundamentals of conflict.
Right. Chapter 2. Sun Tzu kicks off by just establishing the sheer gravity of it all. He stresses that war isn't some casual thing you just decide to do. It is, and this is his phrasing, a matter of vital importance to the state. It's a road, he says, that leads either to safety or to ruin.
So an existential calculation, you cannot afford to neglect it.
Exactly. And that calculation, he says, has to be rooted in understanding 5 absolutely non-negotiable factors, prerequisites for conflict. He calls them the 5 constant factors.
Okay, so what's the first one? the most foundational, the moral law.
The moral law. Yeah, this is essentially the alignment, the unity between the people and their ruler. It's about having a shared purpose, getting that public buy-in, that consent. If the people are truly aligned, they'll follow the ruler anywhere, they'll share a danger, they won't even fear death for the cause.
And in a non-military context, that's like your company culture, maybe.
Yeah.
Or your political mandate.
Absolutely. If you don't have that foundational morale, that unity, your whole operation, military or otherwise, is pretty much doomed before you even start. It's that fundamental.
Okay, factor 2 is heaven, which sounds grand, but it's really about timing and environment, right?
Yeah, heaven signifies things like night and day, cold and heat, the specific times and seasons, what he calls the general economy of heaven. It's all about when and where you should make your move, understanding those environmental conditions, those temporal advantages.
Then third is earth, the physical landscape.
Ground and distance, simple as that. Is the terrain open? Is it difficult? Is it hemmed in? Precipitous heights? You have to know the ground.
Fourth is the commander, the leader.
The leader themselves. And Sun Tzu gets specific here. He lists 5 key qualities: wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness.
That's interesting. Sincerity right there next to courage. We often think military command is just about bravery and, tactics.
Right, but think about it. Sincerity builds trust. A commander who isn't sincere, who people don't believe, they can't secure that moral law we just talked about, which is essential for victory. Benevolence is also key. You have to care for your troops. But, and this is crucial, it has to be balanced with strictness. You need that iron discipline too.
So it's a complex mix, ethics and iron will.
Exactly. Sun Tzu understood that a truly successful commander needs that blend.
And the fifth factor, method and discipline. This sounds like the practical stuff.
It is. The organization, the chain of command, how you manage expenditures, supplies, all the nuts and bolts of how the whole military machine actually runs.
Okay, so once you've analyzed those 5 factors, the general then moves on to what Sun Tzu calls the 7 considerations. These are the calculations to actually forecast victory.
That's right. It's about getting specific. So these include asking, which ruler actually possesses the moral law? Which commander is more able, more competent? Which army has the advantages of heaven and earth, the timing and terrain?
And crucially,
Which army is stronger? And one commentator, Mei Yao Chen, pointed out this means strength, both physically and, sheer numbers, big battalions, and morally, the esprit de corps.
the fighting spirit.
Exactly. He also asks, which army is better trained? Officers and men. And this is a big one where our reward and punishment more constant, more reliable.
That last point, consistency in reward and punishment. That feels incredibly relevant for leadership today, doesn't it? Inconsistency just breeds chaos and cynicism.
Totally. Sun Tzu is arguing that a clear, reliable system of incentives and consequences is actually more valuable than just having more soldiers. You need that constant discipline, enforced reliably. But then, right after laying out all this detailed accounting, Sun Tzu immediately warns against being too rigid.
Oh, this is where it gets really interesting, yeah. He says the general must use helpful circumstances over and beyond the ordinary rules.
This is that critical split between theory and practice,
Yeah.
right? Context is everything. Flexibility has to trump abstract principles sometimes. There's that famous anecdote, Cheng Yu cites it. Before the Battle of Waterloo, Lord Uxbridge asks Wellington for his battle plan.
Yeah.
And Wellington basically refused to tell him, said his plans would depend entirely on what Napoleon did. You can't just blindly stick to a plan if the enemy does something unexpected. You have to adapt.
And this flexibility, this adaptability, it leads to maybe the most famous line in the whole book, the core principle of this chapter. All warfare is based on deception.
Foundational. Absolutely foundational. When you are able to attack, you have to seem unable. When you're near the enemy, make them think you're far away.
Yeah.
You have to hold out baits, lure them in, feign disorder, make them think you're vulnerable, then crush them.
So play with their perception.
Constantly. If the enemy is secure everywhere, be prepared, wait for an opening. If they're much stronger, evade them, don't engage directly. If your opponent has a quick temper, a choleric type, seek to irritate him, provoke him into making a mistake. Feign weakness before you pounce. Attack where they least expect it, where they're unprepared. It's pure psychological maneuvering.
Okay, so we've established the calculations you need to prepare for war. Now, Sun Tzu shifts gears immediately to the really sobering cost of actually waging it. That takes us to chapter 3, Raging war. He's basically putting a price tag on conflict here.
Yeah, and the first thing he details is just the sheer logistical nightmare. I mean, think about it. You mobilize 1,000 swift chariots, 100,000 mail-clad soldiers, plus all the baggage trains, the supplies you need for months. The cost, the expenditure is just astronomical. It completely drains the state's wealth.
And the big danger then is letting it drag on. Protraction.
Exactly. If the campaign drags on, Sun Tzu warns, your weapons are dulled, your ardor damped, your strength exhausted, and your treasure spent. And when that happens, you can bet rival states or, competitors in a business sense, they will absolutely rise up and take advantage of your weakness.
He makes a really striking point here. Cleverness is never associated with long delays. That seems counterintuitive.
It does, right. But his logic is about efficiency. Lengthy operations mean your army gets worn out, the treasury empties. One commentator, Hoshi, even observed that stupid haste, if it leads to a quick victory, actually saves more treasure and energy than some cleverly planned but really drawn-out operation. Speed becomes an economic necessity.
Which leads directly to his strategy on foraging, right?
Yeah.
Which is crucial for minimizing the cost back home. He gives this incredible ratio. 1 cartload of the enemy's provisions is equivalent to 20 of one's own.
That ratio is just genius logistical thinking. Why 20? Because, he calculates, your own army consumes 19 of its own cartloads, just transporting that 20th one, the actual usable supplies, to the front line. It's eaten up by the journey.
Wow.
But if you capture the enemy's supply wagon, you eliminate that entire costly transportation chain instantly. So, a wise general must forage on the enemy. It prevents the impoverishment of his own people back home, who would otherwise face crippling war taxes, maybe losing, 3/10 of their household income. Foraging isn't just a military tactic, it's almost an act of responsible governance.
So it's not just about the stuff, the logistics. It's psychological, too. To get soldiers to risk their lives for plunder, you have to get them angry at the enemy.
Right. You need to rouse their anger to make them fight fiercely to kill the enemy. And then to capture the advantage, the spoils of war, they must be rewarded with those captured goods. It fuels the momentum.
So the big takeaway from this chapter.
It's powerful and clear. Let your great object be victory, not lengthy campaigns. The leader of the armies, the general, is the nation's key decision-maker. He's the arbiter of the people's fate, deciding whether the nation stays safe or faces ruin. Everything must be calculated towards swift, decisive action. Minimize the cost, maximize the speed. Okay, Chapter 4, Attack by Stratagem. This one. This might be the most famous part of Sun Tzu's whole philosophy. It sets up this really clear hierarchy where psychological and political wins are way better than just physical fighting.
Right, the idea that supreme excellence is taking the enemy's country whole and intact, capturing their units without destroying them, the unfought victory.
Exactly. Sun Tzu explicitly states, supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Why? Because it saves blood, saves time, saves treasure. The ultimate goal isn't annihilation, it's psychological and political conquest, making them give up before the real battle starts.
We see modern examples of that, right? You mentioned Moltke's Sedan earlier.
Yeah, a classic example. Moltke basically outmaneuvered and positioned his forces so well that a huge French army just capitulated. They were surrounded, cut off. It happened practically without needing a massive, bloody assault on their trenches. Superior strategy made the fighting almost unnecessary.
So Sun Tzu lays out a hierarchy for generals. What's the best strategy? Number 1.
Number 1, balk the enemy's plans. Anticipate what they're going to do and hit them first, or counter it preemptively. Stop them before they even start.
Okay, number 2.
Prevent the junction of enemy forces, especially important back in the Warring States period with all those shifting alliances. Isolate your enemy from their allies. Divide the coalition. Conquer them one by one.
Makes sense. 3rd.
Third is attacking the enemy army in the field. Engaging them when they're at full strength. This is already less ideal because it means a direct fight, draining your resources.
And the worst policy. The absolute last resort.
Besieging walled cities. Sun Tzu sees this as just catastrophic. It wastes incredible amounts of time, manpower, resources, just a meat grinder.
And the numbers follow this logic. He gives specific ratios. 10-1.
Surround them. 5-1. Attack straight away. Overwhelm them.
But what about 2-1? If you only have twice their numbers, he says divide the army in 2. That sounds like it violates the principle of concentrating your force.
It does sound like it, yeah. Which is why Ts'ao, the commentator, had to step in and clarify. Dividing the army here doesn't mean splitting your force in half and sending them off in different directions. It means using one part in the expected way, the frontal attack, that's the Qi the direct move,
Okay.
and you use the other part for a special diversion, a flanking attack, maybe hitting them from the rear. That's the CHI, the indirect surprise move. You're essentially crushing the enemy from two angles at once, achieving concentration at the crucial point of attack. Even though your forces started divided, it's sophisticated.
Got it. And the rest of the ratios are clear. If you're equally matched, you can offer battle. If you're weaker.
If slightly inferior, avoid them. If totally outnumbered, you flee. A small force trying to stubbornly fight a much larger one, it's just doomed.
But all these numbers, these ratios, they don't mean much if the command structure itself is broken, right?
Yeah.
This is where he talks about the three misfortunes ways a distant ruler can mess things up.
Exactly. These are critical errors caused by interference from above.
So the first one is hobbling the army. What's that?
That's when the ruler, from afar, commands the army to advance or retreat when the conditions on the ground make it impossible or disastrous to obey. It's like, demanding a key business decision be reversed for purely political reasons back at headquarters, completely tying the manager's hands and wrecking the project's momentum.
Okay, second is fortune.
Causing restlessness by trying to micromanage, trying to govern an army in the same way as he administers a kingdom. Sun Tzu says, look, humanity and justice are fine for governing a peaceful state, but an army needs opportunism, speed, ruthless flexibility. You can't run a war campaign with the slow, careful bureaucracy of a kingdom. They're different things.
And the third way the ruler can interfere.
Shaking confidence. This happens when the ruler employs officers without discrimination, not based on their actual skills or the needs of the situation, but maybe for political favor or something. This lack of clear competence filtering down from the top just destroys troop morale and trust in leadership.
So when you look at the 5 essentials for victory he lists later in the chapter.
They're all basically preconditions for the general having autonomy. The general needs the military skill, yes, but crucially, he needs to operate without being interfered with constantly by the sovereign. Trust the expert on the ground.
And this whole focus on getting your own house in order, your own command structure right, leads to that core test. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles.
The absolute classic formulation, and the negative example he gives, Fu Qian, is perfect. Fu Qian knew himself. He knew he had this massive army, like 1 million soldiers, but he totally underestimated his enemy's fighting ability, their commander's skill. He didn't know the enemy, and that led to a complete catastrophe at the Fei River. Knowing yourself is only half the equation.
Okay, so if Chapter 4 was about the hierarchy of command and strategy, Chapter 5, tactical dispositions, seems to zoom right in on internal preparation, making yourself unbeatable before you even engage the enemy.
Yeah, it's a really powerful, proactive concept. Security, he says, lies entirely in our own hands. We make ourselves invincible first, that's step 1. The opportunity to actually defeat the enemy, though, that comes entirely from the enemy making mistakes.
So you can be ready to win, but if the enemy never messes up,
you might not get the chance. The good fighter secures himself against defeat, makes sure he can't lose, and then waits patiently for the enemy to provide that opening. You can know how to conquer, but you might not be able to do it if the enemy simply remains perfect in their defense.
And this is where Sun Tzu introduces that fascinating paradox of excellence. True excellence isn't obvious.
Exactly. It's almost invisible to outsiders. He says if you only see victory when it's blindingly obvious to the common herd. He uses metaphors like lifting a single autumn hair or easily seeing the sun and moon. That's not the real peak of skill.
So what is?
The clever fighter excels in winning with ease. His victories are so well prepared, so inevitable, that they bring him neither reputation for wisdom nor credit for courage. Why? Because the enemy often just submits or collapses before any real bloodshed happens. The victory was secured long before the clash.
He wins, basically, by making no mistakes himself and exploiting an enemy who is already defeated because their position, their preparation was fundamentally flawed from the start.
Precisely. And the way you achieve this kind of preemptive certainty is through a really systematic, almost scientific method. Sun Tzu lays it out. Step 1, measurement, carefully surveying the ground, the terrain. Step 2, estimation of quantity, considering the enemy's overall condition, their strength, their resources. Step 3, calculation, analyzing all that data you've collected. Step 4, balancing of chances, comparing your own chances against theirs based on the calculations. And finally, step 5, victory.
That sounds less like battlefield poetry and more like, I don't know, strategic planning for a huge engineering project or something.
It really does. It's about removing chance, removing luck from the equation as much as possible. And when you follow this system, the result, the force you generate is visually staggering. He uses these metaphors. A victorious army is like a pound's weight placed in the scale against a single grain, utterly unbalanced.
Overwhelming.
Totally. The onrush is like the bursting of pent-up waters into a chasm 1,000 fathoms deep. It's this irresistible, almost natural force that's been created entirely by superior calculation and preparation beforehand.
Right, moving into Chapter 6, energy. Now we seem to be leaving that internal security focus and diving more into the actual methods of engagement, particularly these two main methods of attack. But first, he notes, controlling a large force is manageable.
Yeah, he says it's basically just a matter of dividing up the numbers logically and instituting really clear signs and signals. Organization makes scale manageable.
But the core strategic idea here is the relationship between Qianzhe and Chi, the direct and the indirect methods.
Right. Chengen's the expected move, the normal formation, the frontal attack. It's what you use to join battle to fix the enemy's attention. Chi, on the other hand, is the abnormal maneuver, the surprise element. That's what you use to secure the actual decisive victory.
And the real genius is how they work together, right? They're interchangeable.
Exactly. What the enemy expects you to do. That's Chi-H. So you show them that. What surprises them hits them from an unexpected angle. That's Chai. But here's the clever part. If the enemy successfully anticipates or guards against your Chi move, that surprise move instantly becomes the new expected move. It becomes Qin.
So it keeps shifting.
Constantly shifting, the two have to work together seamlessly, creating this kind of strategic fog for the enemy. They never know what's the feint and what's the real blow. The Han Xin example illustrates this perfectly.
Remind us of that one.
He was marching against Lin Qin. His main force marched directly towards it. That was the Qing, the obvious move everyone expected. But simultaneously, he sent a large, separate force across the Yellow River using these makeshift rafts. Completely unexpected. That was the Chi. It totally confused and disconcerted his opponent, split their attention, and led directly to his victory.
So the combination of direct and indirect, Cheng and Chi, that's what creates this infinite variety. Inexhaustible as heaven and earth, he says.
Yeah, it's like having just 5 musical notes, but being able to create endless melodies. The basic building blocks are simple, but the combinations, the ways you can use them together, are limitless.
And this is critical for making deception work effectively.
Absolutely. Because Sun Tzu argues you can only successfully feign weakness if you are fundamentally strong underneath. For example, simulated disorder, making your troops look disorganized. That only works if you actually have perfect discipline under the surface. Simulated fear requires real courage. Simulated weakness needs underlying strength.
You have to be ordered to convincingly look sloppy.
Precisely. We saw that genius move by Sun Pin, who is a descendant of Sun Wu. He was marching against his rival, Peng Chuan. And each night, he deliberately reduced the number of campfires his army lit. Went from 100,000 down to just 20,000 over 3 nights.
What was the goal there?
He was counting on Peng Chuan's spies, reporting the shrinking army back to him. He wanted Peng Chuan to believe his forces were deserting, losing heart, becoming cowardly, and Peng Chuan bought it. Intoxicated by this perceived weakness, he sped up his pursuit, got overconfident, and marched right into a devastating ambush Sun Pin had prepared.
Wow. That's brilliant deception, relying entirely on the enemy's interpretation of the signs, underpinned by his own army's hidden discipline.
Exactly. So the really clever combatant, Sun Tzu concludes, relies on combined energy. That's the power of the army as a whole, the momentum of the entire organization working together through CHM and CHI. You don't rely on demanding too much extraordinary heroism from just individuals. It's the system, the energy of the whole that wins. Okay, so Chapter 7, Weak Points and Strong. Here we shift again, moving from generating internal energy to how you engage externally. It's all about seizing the initiative, imposing your will on the opponent, making them fight on your terms.
And the basic rule is the clever fighter gets there first, right? Arrives fresh, makes the enemy come to them. How do you actually impose your will like that?
2 main ways. You can force the enemy to come towards you by holding out some kind of irresistible advantage, dangle a carrot, basically. Or you can make them retreat, force them back, by inflicting damage on something vital to them. Use the stick. Either way, you control the pace and the place of the engagement.
This seems connected to the idea of attacking the void. You win by attacking where the enemy isn't.
Yes, attacking the void is like the ultimate expression of this. You are practically guaranteed success, Sun Tzu argues, if you only attack places that are undefended.
Meaning what, exactly? Physically undefended places.
It can be physical, yeah, but also metaphorical. Target weak points where the enemy general lacks skill, where their discipline is poor, where supplies are scarce, or where they just haven't taken proper precautions. If you know where the enemy isn't strong, where they aren't defending properly, victory becomes almost certain. It's about exploiting weaknesses, not just confronting strength.
And to do that effectively, you need to master subtlety, be invisible and inaudible.
That's the key. You have to conceal your own plans, your own movements. That's how you hold the enemy's fate in your hands. Because if they don't know where you are or what you intend, they can't effectively counter you.
So the master plan has to be secret. He says the skillful attacker's opponent doesn't know what to defend.
And the skillful defender's opponent doesn't know what to attack. It perfectly encapsulates the art of war, controlling the enemy's perception of reality, making them guess constantly.
Which leads to this amazing idea of using pure psychological warfare, or bluff. If you don't want to fight, just throw something odd and unaccountable in their way to confuse them.
Yeah, the ultimate example of this is Zhuge Liang's famous empty city stratagem. His city was about to be attacked by this massive army led by Ssu-ma. Liang had very few troops, so what did he do?
Tell us.
He ordered all the flags taken down, silenced the war drums, and threw the city gates wide open. Inside, all Ssu-ma''s scouts could see were a few old men calmly sweeping the streets. Nothing else.
That's incredibly bold. What happened?
Ssu-ma, faced with this completely bizarre, unexpected situation, the total opposite of a city preparing for a desperate defense, immediately suspected a huge, elaborate ambush. He thought, this has to be a trap, and he withdrew his entire army. The bluff worked perfectly because it was so counterintuitive it shattered the enemy's assumptions.
That's incredible. And this strategy of controlling perception also influences how you use your forces, right?
Yeah.
Keeping your own plans secret forces the enemy to spread out.
Exactly. If the enemy doesn't know where you'll strike, they have to try and defend everywhere. They're forced to divide their forces, guard every possible approach. This makes their many soldiers effectively into a few at any single point. Meanwhile, you, knowing your own plan, can concentrate your hidden forces and attack their dispersed units, being many to the enemy's few at the decisive spot. Frederick the Great later warned against exactly that mistake, spreading forces too thin in defense.
Sun Tzu wraps this up with that great analogy. Military tactics are like water.
Yeah, it's profound. Water naturally avoids high ground, what is strong, and flows towards low ground, what is weak. Water has no constant shape. It adapts to the container. Similarly, he says, in warfare, there are no constant conditions. Your tactics must constantly change, adapt fluidly based on the specific terrain and the specific enemy you face. Rigidity is death, adaptability is life. All right, Chapter 8, Maneuvering. This chapter gets really practical about the sheer difficulty and the physical risks involved in moving a large army around, especially when you deviate from the straightforward path.
The core challenge seems to be turning that devious, unexpected route into the direct route to success, and somehow turning the inherent misfortune and risk of a hard march into a strategic advantage.
That's it, exactly. And the classic example here is Chao al-Kari. She's forced marched to OU. He was up against the Chan army. He pulled off this amazing deception. For 28 days, he made it look like he was just slowly, painstakingly strengthening his camp. Only about 30 LI, that's maybe 10 miles from the capital. He made sure enemy spies would report back how slow and cautious he was being.
Setting them up.
Totally setting them up. Then suddenly, he ordered this incredibly rapid force march, 2 days and 1 night straight, and boom. He seized the strategically vital North Hill, overlooking the battlefield, before the enemy even realized he'd moved decisively. He turned devious delay into direct, swift advantage.
That's brilliant tactical maneuvering. But Sun Tzu warns these kinds of forced marches are super risky, right?
Hugely risky. He calculates that marching 100 LI, maybe 30 miles or so nonstop to gain an advantage. You risk losing the leaders of all 3 divisions of your army to exhaustion, to getting lost, to ambush. He estimates maybe only 1/10 of the army will actually reach the destination in fighting condition. The sheer hardship of the march can be worse than the battle itself.
So commanders like Stonewall Jackson, famous for his marches.
They understood this trade-off. Jackson used forced marches, but typically only rarely, and specifically for maximum surprise when the potential gain outweighed the enormous risk. You don't do it routinely.
This really highlights the basic knowledge you need before you even move. An army needs its baggage, its provisions, its supply bases. It's lost without them.
Absolutely fundamental. And you can't make alliances without understanding your neighbor's real intentions. You absolutely must use local guides. You can't maneuver effectively without knowing the terrain intimately. The mountains, the forests, the swamps, the pitfalls. Ignorance of the ground is fatal.
Sun Tzu uses some really evocative descriptions for the army's movement and stance here.
Yeah, they're almost poetic, but deeply practical. Be rapid like the wind. Be compact and impenetrable like the forest. When raiding, be like fire quick, consuming. When holding a position, be immovable like a mountain. Your plan should be dark, inscrutable like night. And when you move, fall like a thunderbolt, setter and decisive.
And then we get to the critical prohibitions. These seem like common sense rules of engagement, but maybe easy to forget in the heat of the moment.
Very easy to forget when adrenaline is high. Basic stuff like, don't attack an enemy uphill. Don't oppose them when they're coming downhill with momentum. Don't pursue an enemy who pretends to flee. It's almost always a trap, an ambush. Don't attack soldiers whose morale, whose temper is obviously keen and sharp, wait for them to dull. Don't swallow baits the enemy offers you.
And this next one seems really important for risk assessment. Don't interfere with an army that's already heading home.
Critical point. Why? Because they are fighting with the courage of despair. Han Hessen said it perfectly. Invincible is the soldier who hath his desire and returneth homewards. Their motivation is absolute get home alive. They'll fight unbelievably hard. Don't get in their way unless you absolutely have to.
Conversely, when you surround an enemy army, he says, leave an outlet free. Don't press a desperate foe too hard. Why is that so important?
Because if you completely trap an enemy, leave them no hope of escape, their desperation turns them into cornered animals. They will fight with unbelievable ferocity, using their claws and teeth, as the old saying goes. This will cost you dearly, even if you win. If you leave them a path, even a difficult one, for retreat, most will take it. It eases the pressure, reduces their fighting spirit, and minimizes your own losses. It's strategically smarter.
Okay, Chapter 9, Variation in Tactics. The absolute core message here is adaptability. The title uses 9 variations, but 9 in this context just means an indefinitely large number. The point is, the general has to be able to vary his tactics constantly, to the utmost degree.
And this means knowing what not to do as well. Situations to avoid.
Exactly. Knowing which road should not be followed, maybe because of ambush risk or because they lead nowhere useful. Knowing which enemy armies should not be attacked, perhaps because you can't achieve a decisive result or the cost is too high. Knowing which town should not be besieged.
Right, you mentioned Turenne earlier, the French marshal. Yeah, Turenne said it was a huge mistake to waste soldiers taking one town, when the same effort, the same cost in lives, could potentially gain you an entire province elsewhere. It's about strategic priorities and adapting to the bigger picture.
This chapter also contains probably the most provocative statement about command in the whole book.
Definitely. The boldest one. There are commands of the sovereign which must not be obeyed.
Wow. Directly contradicting the ruler.
Yes. If military necessity on the ground demands a different course of action, if the circumstances have changed drastically, the general's judgment must, in that moment, override even the emperor's wishes sent from afar. Adaptability and immediate reality trump rigid adherence to outdated orders. It's a radical statement about the general's responsibility and autonomy.
So a wise leader has to constantly weigh advantage and disadvantage together. Always keep the opposite possibility in mind.
Always. If you're focused on achieving some gain, you must simultaneously consider the potential harm or risk involved. If you're struggling through difficulties, facing setbacks, you must constantly be looking for that unexpected opportunity, that advantage you can seize to turn things around. Never get fixated on just one side of the coin. And then Sun Tzu turns inward, focusing on the general's own character. He outlines the 5 dangerous faults. These are personal risks, internal flaws in the leader that can absolutely ruin the conduct of war.
Okay, what's the first one?
Recklessness. This leads directly to destruction. It's bravery without any forethought, just fighting desperately like a mad bull, as one commentator put it. All courage, no brains, fatal.
Second.
Cowardice. This leads to capture. This is the leader who is so focused on staying alive himself, on avoiding personal risk, that he won't take necessary chances or commit his forces when needed. Paralysis through fear.
Third.
A quick temper. Being easily provoked, easily irritated. A hot-headed general can be easily manipulated by the enemy into making rash, ill-considered decisions.
Fourth sounds a bit more subtle. A delicacy of honor, being too sensitive to shame.
Yeah, this is the leader who is too thin-skinned. They get easily stung by criticism, by slanderous reports, by insults maybe planted by the enemy. Their wounded pride then drives them to make poor choices just to prove the critics wrong, rather than sticking to sound strategy.
And the fifth dangerous fault, over-solicitude for his men.
This sounds like a voce, right? Caring for your troops. But over-solicitude exposes the general to worry and hesitation. It's the flaw of consistently sacrificing essential military advantage or strategic opportunity because you're overly concerned about the immediate comfort or safety of your soldiers. Benevolence is vital, as we said, but excessive worry can cripple decisive action when it's most needed.
And the warning Sun Tzu gives is severe.
Absolutely stark. If an army is overthrown, if its leader is slain, the ultimate cause will almost certainly be found among these 5 dangerous faults. They are failures of character, deep within the commander, not just random failures of circumstance or bad luck. Leadership integrity and balance are paramount. Chapter 10, The Army on the March. This gets incredibly practical again. It's full of guidance on deployment, how to choose terrain, and some really sophisticated methods for reconnaissance, what Sun Tzu calls reading the signs.
Okay, so setting up camp, what are the basic rules?
Simple, but based on survival logic. Keep to valleys for shelter, but camp on high ground within the valley, facing the sun for warmth and observation. After you cross a river, get far away from it quickly. Don't linger near the bank where you're vulnerable.
And if the enemy is crossing a river towards you?
Don't meet them midstream. That's usually disastrous.
Okay.
Instead, the classic tactic is let half the army get across and then deliver your attack. Hit them when they're divided and vulnerable, half on one bank, half still in the water or on the other side.
We saw that with Han Tits again, right?
Yeah.
At the Wei River.
Exactly. That brilliant use of the upstream sandbag dam. He lured the enemy across by feigning defeat, then broke the dam, trapping half their army mid-river and annihilating them. Perfect execution of that principle.
Okay, now the reading the signs part. This seems like next-level observation skills. What should scouts be looking for?
It's amazing detail. If the enemy is close by but staying quiet, it means they're relying on their natural defensive strength, confident in their position. If they keep their distance but try to provoke you into attacking, it means they want you to advance, probably because they hold a strong position and want to lure you onto unfavorable ground.
What about their camp?
If they set up camp in a place with really easy access, it's likely a bait, a trap. Be suspicious. If you see birds suddenly rising in flight from woods or tall grass, that's a classic sign of an ambush hidden below.
And even the dust kicked up by the army tells a story.
Incredible detail here. A high, thin column of dust rising. That usually means chariots are moving fast. A low, wide cloud of dust. That's infantry on the march. Dust branching out in different directions, like tree limbs. That means troops are spreading out to collect firewood. Dust moving back and forth in small clouds. That probably means the army is setting up camp or surveying the area. You read these tiny signals to figure out their real activity and intent.
Amazing. And this chapter also has that long story about Tian Tan defending the city of Chimo. That was a masterclass in psychological warfare.
Oh, absolutely. Pure manipulation. First, he used converted spies to spread rumors designed to make the enemy commander from the state of Yen do terrible things like cutting off the noses of captured prisoners from Chimo or digging up the ancestral tombs outside the city.
Why would he want the enemy to do that?
Because when the Yen commander foolishly did those things, confirming the rumors, it absolutely enraged Tian Tan's own soldiers inside the city. It filled them with hatred and a desperate desire for revenge. He turned the enemy's cruelty into fuel for his own troops' morale.
Clever. And then he completed the deception.
Yeah, he sent fake envoys pretending to negotiate surrender. He got the city's richest citizens to openly bribe the enemy generals, making it look like the city's resistance was totally crumbling from within, while the Yen army grew complacent, greedy, and careless, thinking victory was near.
That's when he struck.
That's when he unleashed the final insane attack. At night, he sent out 1,000 oxen. They had sharp blades tied to their horns and oil-soaked reeds tied to their tails, which were set on fire. These flaming, charging beasts stampeded into the unprepared Yen camp, followed immediately by 5,000 elite hidden warriors. The result was total panic and rout for the besiegers, pure psychological shock and awe.
Incredible story. What's the underlying lesson Sun Tzu draws from all this?
It comes back to balance. Soldiers need to be treated with humanity. He cites another general, Wu Tzu, who shared hardships with his men, even personally sucked poison from a soldier's wound. That builds loyalty. But that humanity must be combined with iron discipline. You need both. The ideal commander, as Wu Tzu said, unites culture and kindness with a firm, warlike temper. One without the other is ineffective.
Okay, chapter 11 finally gives us a systematic look at terrain. Sun Tzu details 6 specific categories of grounds, and maybe even more importantly, he talks about 6 ways a general can cause defeat that have nothing to do with the terrain itself.
Right. First, the 6 types of terrain and the basic action needed for each. There's accessible ground open, easy to traverse. Here, you want to occupy the raised, sunny spots first and carefully guard your supply lines. Second, entangling ground difficult terrain, like marshes or thick forests where it's easy to get bogged down. Here, if you get there first, hold it. If the enemy gets there first, only sally forth if you're sure they're unprepared or disordered. Otherwise, it's a trap. Third is temporizing ground where neither side gains an immediate advantage by advancing. Here, the best move is often to feign retreat, trying to lure the enemy out into a less advantageous position.
Fourth,
Narrow passes. If you occupy them first, garrison them strongly and hold them. If the enemy holds them, don't attack directly unless they are weakly guarded. Fifth, precipitous heights. Like accessible ground, occupy the high sunny spots first and wait for the enemy. Don't attack uphill. And sixth, positions at a great distance from the enemy. If you're far apart, don't try to provoke a battle. The effort to close the distance might exhaust you.
Okay, that covers the ground itself. Now, what about these 6 calamities? These are purely the general's fault?
Entirely the general's fault, yes. Not due to terrain or bad luck. These are failures of command. First is flight. This happens if your force is massively outnumbered, say 10-1, and you failed to recognize the disparity and retreat earlier. Engaging was a mistake.
Second,
Insubordination. This is when the common soldiers are too strong-willed or unruly, and the officers are too weak or hesitant to enforce discipline effectively. The army lacks cohesion. Third is collapse. This is the opposite problem. The officers are too strong, maybe too eager or aggressive, but the common soldiers are too weak or poorly trained and they fail to follow through. The structure breaks down from the bottom.
fourth sounds like infighting, ruin.
Yeah, this is caused by senior officers getting angry or resentful maybe at each other, or at the commander-in-chief and launching attacks out of personal pique without orders or before the overall situation has been assessed. Personal ambition destroying coordination. Fifth is disorganization. This stems from a weak or indecisive general whose orders are unclear or inconsistent. It leads to confusion, sloppiness in the ranks, lack of coordination.
And sixth, rout.
Rout happens when a general commanding an inferior force foolishly engages a much larger one without having placed his very best, elite, picked soldiers in the front line to absorb the initial shock or lead the charge. It's a failure to properly utilize his limited resources in the most critical spot. These are all fundamentally leadership failures.
So the ultimate test of a great general, according to this chapter.
It's his ability to do it all. Accurately estimate the adversary, effectively control his own forces, and shrewdly calculate all the difficulties, dangers, and distances involved. It's this total combination of character, intellect, and practical capacity.
And he brings back that idea of disobeying the ruler if necessary.
Absolutely. He reiterates, if fighting is certain to result in victory, based on your assessment of all these factors, then you must fight, even though the ruler forbid it. Military necessity trumps politics. But conversely, the general who is too soft-indulgent but without real authority, or kind-hearted but unable to enforce commands, makes his soldiers useless, like spoilt children. They can't achieve anything practical.
And he wraps up with this idea of completing the knowledge matrix.
Right. Just knowing yourself isn't enough. Just knowing the enemy isn't enough. Victory is only partial then. But if you know the enemy and know yourself, your victory will not stand in doubt. And then the ultimate addition. If you know heaven and know earth timing and terrain, you may make your victory complete. You need all pieces of the puzzle. Okay, chapter 12 takes us into the 9 situations. These are even more specialized types of ground, particularly relevant for an army invading enemy territory. It details the specific tactics required for each, moving from ground where troops naturally want to scatter, all the way to ground where they have no choice but to fight to the death.
So 9 specific situations, each demanding a particular response. Let's touch on a few key ones. Dispersive ground.
That's ground near the border, close to home. On this ground, Sun Tzu says, fight not. Why? Because soldiers' thoughts will naturally turn towards home. They'll be tempted to scatter. Morale for an offensive fight is low here.
Contentious ground.
This is ground that offers a significant advantage to whoever holds it first. Key strategic locations. Here, the rule is, attack not. if the enemy has already secured it. Don't waste lives trying to take a strong position they already hold.
What about serious ground, deep inside enemy territory?
Here, you're far from home, committed. Sun Tzu advises, gather and plunder. You need to live off the land, ensure you have the supplies for a potentially protracted campaign or resistance. It's about sustainability deep in hostile territory.
Hemmed-in ground, where escape routes are limited.
On this kind of ground, you must resort to stratagem. Cleverness is your only way out. This is where we get that fantastic story of Hannibal trapped by the Roman general Fabius in a mountain pass, a defile.
Right. What did Hannibal do?
At night, he tied bundles of sticks to the horns of thousands of oxen, set them on fire, and drove the panicked animals up the hillsides away from the actual pass. The Romans guarding the pass saw the lights moving up the cliffs and assumed Hannibal was attempting a desperate torchlit escape over the mountains. They rushed off to intercept them.
Leaving the pass unguarded.
Exactly, allowing Hannibal to slip his entire army quietly and unmolested through the now empty pass. Pure stratagem on hemmed-in ground.
Incredible. And finally, desperate ground, where you're facing certain destruction if you don't act.
On desperate ground, there's only one option: fight. Because death is certain if you just sit there passively, clinging to your corner. Only by launching a fierce, all-out attack do you have any chance of survival. Your back is against the wall.
The underlying principle driving all these specific tactics seems to be speed, right?
Rapidity is the essence of war. That's the quote. Urgency is key. We see this again with Ssu-ma, anticipating Meng Ta's planned revolt. Ssu-ma covered nearly 400 miles in just 8 days, an incredible forced march. He arrived so unexpectedly fast that Meng Ta hadn't even finished fortifying the city. He was forced to surrender simply because Ssu-ma's speed completely negated all his preparations.
And this leads to that really harsh-sounding tactic, deliberately putting your own soldiers into positions whence there is no escape.
Yeah, it sounds brutal. But the logic is that if soldiers know there's no retreat, no way out, they will fight with unbelievable ferocity. They'll prefer death in battle to certain capture or slaughter if they flee. Han Shen did this deliberately, famously lining up his troops with their backs right against a river before a major battle. His officers thought he was crazy.
But it worked.
It worked spectacularly. Knowing they couldn't retreat, the soldiers fought with desperate courage and won a stunning victory against a superior force. He achieved victory by removing the option of retreat.
Yet, at the same time, the general must also mystify his officers and men by false reports and appearances, and thus keep them in total ignorance. That seems contradictory.
It does, but it's about control and preventing leaks. Chao Kong's commentary is blunt. The troops must not be allowed to share your schemes in the beginning. Why? Because the more people who know the plan, the higher the risk of it being compromised, either intentionally or accidentally. Keep your true intentions hidden, even from your own side, until the last possible moment.
So the final advice for this chapter captures that dynamic.
Perfectly. At the critical moment, just before you act, exhibit the coyness of a maiden. Be watchful, passive, unassuming, wait for the perfect opening. But after that opening appears, once you commit, emulate the rapidity of a running hare. Strike with lightning speed and decisiveness, patience, then explosive action.
Okay, chapter 13. This one shifts focus pretty dramatically to the attack by fire, detailing how to use fire as a destructive weapon and reinforcing that need for timing.
Yeah, it's quite specific. He lists 5 ways you can attack using fire. 1. Burning soldiers in their camp, a direct attack on personnel. 2. Burning stores, destroying their supplies. 3. Burning baggage trains, hitting their logistics on the move. 4. Burning arsenals and magazines, destroying their weapons and ammunition stores. And 5. Hurling, dropping fire things like fire arrows, igniting targets from a distance.
And there are strict rules for using fire effectively.
Absolutely. You need the right conditions. Favorable weather is key. Dry conditions help fire spread. And crucially, you need the wind in your favor. You must always attack from windward of the fire so the flames and smoke blow towards the enemy, not back onto your own troops.
Timing is critical too, especially regarding wind.
Yes. He notes that a wind starting during the day tends to last long, giving you a good window for the attack. But a night breeze often falls quickly. So launching a major fire attack at night is much riskier. The wind might die down before the fire achieves its objective.
He compares fire to water as a weapon here.
Right. Water, he says, can be useful for intercepting an enemy, cutting them off, or dividing their forces, like Han Shen did. But water cannot completely rob the enemy of all their belongings. It lacks the sheer, total destructive power of fire, which can annihilate supplies, equipment, and morale in a way water can't. And this discussion of fire leads him to a larger point about taking initiative, about enterprise. He warns that unhappy is the fate of the leader who just waits, who tries to win without actively cultivating the spirit of enterprise. Just sitting back leads to waste of time and general stagnation. The enlightened ruler, the good general, plans ahead, cultivates resources, but also uses aggressive, proactive methods like a well-timed fire attack to force a quick decision and break the deadlock.
But still, the final rule for the ruler remains firm.
Absolutely. Don't move troops, don't start a war merely to gratify your own anger or pique. Don't fight unless the situation is truly critical and the circumstances absolutely demand it. Action must be based on strategic necessity, not emotion. And that brings us to the final chapter, chapter 14, the use of spies. This is arguably Sun Tzu's most critical conclusion, wrapping up the entire strategic discussion with a powerful argument for intelligence, framed, interestingly, in terms of resource management and even humanity.
He starts with the cost of not using spies, right?
Yeah.
The cost of ignorance.
Exactly. It's a brilliant rhetorical move. He lays out the cost of war. Raising a huge army, marching them long distances, it costs, say, 1,000 ounces of silver every single day. It disrupts the lives of 700,000 families back home. Armies might face each other for years, he says, locked in a stalemate, waiting for a single decisive day. So to remain ignorant of the enemy's actual situation, their plans, their dispositions, simply because you grudge the relatively small cost, maybe 100 ounces of silver needed to pay for good spies. Sun Tzu calls that the height of inhumanity. It's inhumane to your own people to prolong their suffering and waste vast resources simply because you were too cheap or too proud to invest in intelligence.
Wow, that flips the usual moral argument about spying on its head.
It really does. Foreknowledge, knowing the enemy's situation in detail, that's what enables the wise ruler and the skilled general to strike precisely, to conquer efficiently, to win quickly, and thus minimize the overall suffering and cost of war.
And this foreknowledge doesn't come from guesswork or superstition.
No way. He's very clear. It cannot be divined from spirits. You can't get it from abstract calculations based on past patterns. It must be obtained from men, from actual human beings who have information about the enemy, from spies.
And he breaks down spies into 5 distinct classes.
Yes, a whole system, class 1. Local spies, these are simply inhabitants of the enemy's country that you employ. Class 2, inward spies. These are enemy officials, people within their government or military that you've managed to bribe, or who are perhaps discontented, ambitious, or maybe seeking favor because they anticipate their side losing. Finding and using these requires really understanding the enemy's internal political cracks.
Number 3.
Converted spies. This is crucial. Getting hold of the enemy's spies and turning them, making them double agents working for you. Sun Tzu emphasizes these are potentially the most valuable agents of all and must be treated with the utmost liberality, generous payment, good treatment to absolutely secure their loyalty.
Okay, class 4 sounds ominous. Doomed spies.
Yeah, these are your own spies that you deliberately give false information to. You contrive for them to be captured by the enemy believes the misinformation, and then, likely, executes your spy. The spy is doomed, but they've served their purpose by planting deception. It's ruthless.
And the 5th class is the most straightforward.
Surviving spies. These are the ones who go out, gather information, and return safely with the news. Your standard scouts, reconnaissance agents, intelligence gatherers.
Managing this whole complex system of espionage, it requires some serious skills from the general.
Absolutely. Sun Tzu lists them. Intuitive sagacity, the ability to instinctively sense truth from falsehood, to read people, benevolence and straightforwardness needed to win the loyalty and trust of your agents, especially converted spies, and subtle ingenuity of mind, the cleverness needed to manage the risks, interpret the information correctly, and weave it all together.
And he points out this isn't just theory, it's historically proven.
Right. He concludes by citing the rise of ancient Chinese dynasties. The Yin dynasty rose thanks to a minister named Ai Qi, who had previously served the losing regime. The Ts'ao dynasty rose thanks to Liu Ya, another agent who had inside knowledge of the previous rulers. The fate of entire dynasties, he argues, rested on the effective use of spies, particularly converted spies. Intelligence is paramount.
Wow, what a comprehensive journey that was, right through the core architecture of military strategy, as laid out by Sun Tzu. We started with that intense initial calculation of risk in laying plans.
The fundamentals.
Moved through the absolute necessity of speed and efficiency in waging war. Established that hierarchy, aiming for the unfought victory in attack by stratagem.
Yeah, avoiding the fight if possible.
touched on maneuver, terrain, energy deception throughout, and ended right here with the absolute non-negotiable need for superior intelligence through the use of spies. It really feels like a complete system. This has been a fantastic shortcut to understanding the foundational structure of strategy.
It really is a seamless structure when you go through it chapter by chapter. And the modern relevance, it's just undeniable, isn't it? Sun Tzu constantly teaches that true strategic victory comes from anticipation, better resource management, psychological warfare, overwhelming preparation, not just from relying on brute force.
Right.
And those concepts, they clearly transcend the battlefield. They apply to pretty much any competitive domain you can think of: business strategy, political campaigns, policy debates, even personal competition sometimes.
If we think back to one of his most challenging instructions, though, there's a real point of paradox there. Sun Tzu insists on deception, not just against the enemy, but sometimes against your own forces. Remember, the general must mystify his officers and men by false reports and appearances, and thus keep them in total ignorance.
Yeah, that's a tough one. He explicitly says success sometimes requires concealing your true intentions, your real plans, even from your closest allies, your own team, until the very last possible moment.
So that raises a big question for today, doesn't it? In our world, where transparency is often held up as this key virtue for leadership, for building trust, for organizational health, what do we do with that? If Sun Tzu is right, if ultimate success in high-stakes competition requires that level of internal secrecy, concealing your core strategy even from your own people.
What does that imply about the real nature of power and trust and leadership in these hyper-competitive modern environments? When you make that move to conquer, whether it's a market or an election or achieving some major goal, what's the actual cost of maintaining that kind of absolute secrecy within your own organization? Does the need for external victory justify the potential internal erosion of trust?
That is definitely something for you to mull over until our next deep dive.